Hello, my loves. Welcome back to the channel for today's video, which is very exciting because we get to talk about decks I used the most in 2024 for my personal practice. I'm also calling this the Standout Decks of 2024 video in no particular order. I've chosen some decks to share with you today and talk about because they either made a big impact on me or I felt really drawn to them or I used them a lot in 2024. So without further ado, I'm going to start with honorable mentions. So the first honorable mention is the Horror Tarot. And the reason this is only an honorable mention is because I already did a version of this video where I talked about the decks I use the most in my professional practice in 2024, and I talked extensively about this deck in that video. So I'm just going to show you a few cards, and if you're interested in a long ramble about why I love this deck, what it's good for, etc., you can go check out that video. I will try to link it for you, but I do really enjoy this deck. I don't use this guidebook at all. If I didn't, if it didn't hurt my little like OCD tendencies, I would throw it away, but I can't. I do have to keep it, but it's always just in the box. I don't use it. But I love this deck as just like a regular RWS-ish deck. But Abigail's art in this is just stunning. I don't find that the pips bother me at all. And I really enjoy the fact that there's monsters in here and there's like the dark and mysterious, and it feels very like fantasy-esque while also somehow being super relatable at the same time. And it deals with the darker themes of life if you want to look into them, but there's also just this lighthearted air about it. I love that it doesn't shy away from the blood. I love the wings. I don't really like the fact that they chose a clown for the sun card. I have no issues with clowns, but I don't like it. I really love this Ten of Cups with the blood. There's just something so romantic about this deck and comforting in a way where if I just want a deck to look into something, if I want to feel kind of guided a little bit, I like to use this deck. And I don't mean guided as in like, because I don't use the guidebook, right? So it's not like guiding me per se. I also really enjoy this card, this depiction of the Ten of Wands. They really do good with the tens in here. But what am I trying to say? It's a fun everyday reader for my personal practice, especially in the darker months of the year. But I do find that this also sometimes will come out in the heat of the summer. And I just really, really enjoy this deck. This deck gets a lot of grief, but I think it's fantastic. And we have a pretty nice working relationship. It's not one that like gets upset per se if I like put it on the shelf for a while. I can just pull it out if and when I feel like it, or put it away for months and we just pick up where we left off. And there's no like ground like prep work with this deck. Like there's nothing to investigate. There's nothing to like assimilate yourself to. Like it's just you take it out of the box and use it. Like that is the Horror Tarot. Again, like I said, I don't use the guidebook. It's more for like a fun novelty guidebook. So if you're actually going to use this to try to learn tarot or you're new to tarot, please get a Tarot 101 book to go with it. But that is the Horror Tarot. I said I'd only honorably mention it, but I just talked about it for like 4 minutes. So there's that. My second kind of honorable mention is the Every Little Thing You Do Is Magic tarot. And the reason this is only an honorable mention is because I only had it for the last 2 months of 2024. And while I did use it pretty heavily during those 4 months, I don't like to review decks or like consider it like, you know, the best. I like to take my time and make sure that it's not just those new warm and fuzzies, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not one of those people who likes the reviews. First impressions are not reviews. Let's just leave it at that. But anyway, I really, really like this deck. I used it pretty much tirelessly in the last 2 months of 2024 and continue to use it. I had a pretty big life change and move across the country in November, and this deck really anchored me on both sides of that move. And I even use this to pull cards in some of the hotel rooms that we stayed at as we were driving down from Maine to Texas. So yeah, this has been a really fun deck for me this year. I really like the art style on this. I love that we have these more like nature-based collage photos with these really tastefully done drawings. And I love that all of the color is in that collage. It's in the background. It's in, like, for instance, this is like a real photo of water, you know what I mean? With those drawn cups in it. And it creates so much dimension. And you get, like, here you have a real picture of an eagle collage in the background with a drawing of one on top. A hawk, I believe is what that was. But anyway, I really, really like this deck. The guidebook is interesting. There are some cards that I really love the description of, while there are other ones where I'm like, the guidebook doesn't really address the animals in the cards, which is a bummer, but I don't find that it deters me at all from using this deck. This is one of those decks that's super accessible because it's mass market and it's very affordable, but it feels like an independently produced deck. And that is something that's really refreshing and very, like, intoxicating about this. And I love the hand-drawn aspects with the photography. It's just like, it's right up my alley. And I really enjoy the doodling on these backs. I love that the cards are larger than normal, but they're not so big that I can't side shuffle them. I tried to do that midair. I don't know why. I thought that was a good idea. But yeah, I really enjoyed this deck for the amount of time that I've had it, and it's one that I'm going to continue to use. And I did use this a little bit in my professional practice as well. It just didn't make the list per se. So that's the Every Little Thing You Do Is Magic tarot. Next, we're going to jump into probably one of my favorite and most used decks of the year. And this is the Witches Tarot by Burning Paper Hearts. This is an independently produced deck. And I feel so privileged to own this deck. I talked extensively about this deck in my end of year tarot tag video. There's nudity in this, by the way. But I love this deck. There's something about it that feels so raw, that touches like those moments where your emotions are like cracked wide open and you aren't quite sure how to nurture yourself or touch them or explain them or understand them. it's really great at flushing out inner emotional turmoil, but in like the most gentle and empowering way. There's something so like dark feminine about this. If you're like naked in a cave and like wanting to be held by like the divine mother energy, this is that deck, and it doesn't shy away from the hard things. Like, it's going to see you just as you are in all your rawness and realness, and it's going to make you a little bit uncomfortable, and it will understand that you're a little bit uncomfortable. And I just really, really love this deck. I use the majors only version of this deck quite often on my altar as altar cards. I also use it sometimes in client work to pull like archetypal themes for people, but mostly I use it for myself, and I'll use it, like I said, in those raw times where I'm needing either a deep understanding of myself or raw, just like empowerment or embodiment advice, or just when I'm working with the dark feminine in general. And I really like that this isn't only a tarot deck, but it also has several other archetype cards within it. For instance, this is the Mother card, and then we have Hecate. It's just a great photographically manipulated, just like realistic, raw, mysterious, loving, deep deck. I don't like this High Priestess card, though. I will say that. I don't know. I don't know what it is about that. But anyway, I could go on and on and on about this deck. Let's see if there's any other ones I want to just pull out as I peruse through here. Oh, here's the moon. Really great deck that I just love using and continue to come back to again and again. And yeah, that's the Witch's Tarot by Burning Paper Hearts. A deck that really piqued my interest, and I'm still like mysteriously getting to know, is the Tarot V. I don't know what it is about this deck. I understand it while at the same time like have a hard time figuring it out sometimes. And then when I do use it, I'm like, whoa. But I have to be in a place where I'm going to like take my time. I'm going to show you images while I do this. So this is like a vampire post-apocalyptic, like not cute. This is not cute vampires. Like, this is not Buffy the Vampire Slayer vampires. This is like horror movie vampires. There is, blood and all kinds of things. This reminds me a little bit of Blade, which is very nostalgic for me. I loved watching Blade growing up. But there's something about this deck. Like, here, this is creepy AF. You do not use this deck in the dark. Like, it also reminds me a little bit of like Resident Evil, the video games. Anyway, I watched my husband play those. What am I trying to say with this deck? You see, it just like, it'll be like random and like, there's no words for this deck. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what it is that I like about this, or if I like it, or when I would use it, or why I feel drawn to use it. you almost get this sense when you use it of like, it's like the deck roofies you. You're like, I don't know what happened to me. Like, I feel different. I feel like I got this profound message. I feel like I understand what I was inquiring about a little bit more, but at the same time, I feel like I don't even like know. Like, I just don't know what happened. I feel like I sound crazy. Like, what? But that's this deck. One of the things that's challenging about this deck is the court cards. So on the bottom here, you get these little like images. So this is a wand or a club or whatever they call them in this deck. But then you have like this ram looking head. And then you have this mask looking thing. And one of these is the knight, and one of them is the page. And it's either the pages or the knights that they like. One is the vampire hunter, and one is the vampire who just turned. So we can assume that this is the vampire that just turned, and then this is the vampire hunter. And I can never like get the two straight. And I feel like it's really important in a deck to know that, especially since I know that distinction about the story of the characters within the cards. It completely changes the meaning. The kings and queens are a lot easier. Like, this is the queen. But part of that comes with like that confusion, right? Of like, if I'm not using it all the time, I quickly forget which symbol goes with either the knight or the page, and it's very challenging. This is the king symbol. Not that that really matters to you, but I don't know what it is about this deck. I don't know how much more I can say about it without going in circles. But when I figured this deck out, I will share more about it. But all I can say is it's a mysterious experience to work with this deck. It is not for the faint of heart. And if you're going to listen, it will tell you some real stuff. And you're not going to be quite sure how you got there. I really don't like this Hermit card. It's very confronting and gross. But I adore this Judgment card. This is one of my favorite cards in the deck. I always think of this card when I think of this deck. But yeah, all I can say is if you feel drawn to this deck and you don't understand why, give it a shot. Can't tell you why. Just give it a shot. I love this strength card. It's super profound. Here's this giant monster jumping at her, and she is like not scared. She could not be bothered. She's just like, hey. So that's, oh, we have the Four of Pentacles and the Five of Pentacles upside down. That is the Tarot B. There are no words. Just, I'm excited to continue my journey with this deck and figure out what other mysteries it has to share with me. We all have monsters inside. Oh my goodness. I'm getting tired now. Okay. Next deck I want to talk about is the Mystic Dreamers Tarot. This deck, I don't love it and I don't hate it, and I use it, And I used it a lot, especially in the beginning part of the year. But I'm still not sure whether I like it. So why did it make this list? Because I like it. There's something so interesting about this deck. There is so much detail crammed into here, and when you read the guidebook and understand that these images were put together when like dial-up came out, which yes, I was alive for. If you can think back to the capability of computers at that time and the limited capability of them, and the fact that someone like took a paint like program and created these images, it just blows me away, the fact that they were able to do that. But they're so like, it's ethereal, but there's a lot of nature. I love how much water is in here. You have lots of like moon imagery, there's trees, you get lots of birds, which I find is very significant. So there's something about this deck that feels very grounded in an ungrounded sort of way. And I do find that this deck is great for those liminal winter months. This is very much like, this feels like February to me. I don't know why. But this is a very like February deck for me. And I think I would love this deck if the images were larger, honestly, because to really see what's going on, you have to like hold it up like real close. And once you do focus in on that image, you're like, wow, that's amazing. Like this death image. Look at like the child and the death and like the spirit. It's such a good card. I also adore this Wheel of Fortune. Again, with kind of like that death, rebirth, incarnation cycle that's like hidden in the background. The moon. So it's a very profound deck, and the imagery has a lot to be explored. And like, I love all the crows. See the crow on top of the Four of Wands. I love this Eight of Wands. I love that we see the character like resting and waiting. So I don't use this deck a lot. I also really enjoy the Six of Cups, and I usually don't like the Six of Cups. I enjoy this deck a lot. I would use it more if the imagery were bigger. I need to compare. So I can show you what I mean. So this is a standard size tarot card. This is the Golden Art Nouveau Tarot. And then this is the Mystic Dreamers Tarot. So let's say I'm just gonna cover up. So you get this much imagery out of the card. So you're missing like a third of the card, basically, in comparison. And even more than that, because you get the borders, right? So I know some people have trimmed this deck, and like, yeah, that would take the borders off, but that doesn't make it any easier for me to see because the image is still tiny. I don't know if I properly expressed my feelings for this deck, but as you can tell, they're very mixed. I use it. I love it. When I pull it out, I'm like, oh my God, look at that image. But I do find that I didn't reach for it as much as I probably could have, should have, or would have if the images weren't bigger. But if you don't have a problem with the fact that the images are small and you don't care about the guidebook, because I don't really like the guidebook for this deck, I find it very boring. Although I should probably give it a second chance. Anyway, I don't know what I'm trying to say about that one, but I used it and I enjoyed it. Moving on, Leanne. Jeez, I'm crow. Okay, we're almost done here. Next, I'm just going to honorably mention this. This is the Golden Art Nouveau Tarot, which I did just pull out a card from. I will show you a handful of images. This one I did extensively talk about in the tarot tag video, end of year tarot tag. So I will leave that linked if you want to hear me go on and on and on about how much I love this deck. That was like the prompt, deck that you love. And I never in a million years would have thought that I would have loved this deck. I am so happy that I got this in a deck swap because I never would have purchased it for myself. And the second I took it out of the box and started using it, I pretty much haven't put it down. I have used it personally, professionally, with much joy and gratitude. Really, really great standout deck. And again, I won't go on and on about it, but if you'd like to hear about my profound experience and why I love it so much, you can dip your toe into that video. You just make sure, yep, still recording. Okay. Then this next deck is the Thoth Tarot by Aleister Crowley. This is the larger edition. For those of you that haven't noticed, I really enjoy larger decks. I love being able to see the imagery. I love flimsy, glossy cardstock that's easy to shuffle. I don't mind the large ones, even though I have small hands, because I can like side riffle it. See how that like bends? Love it. Anyway, this is a deck that I finally started studying properly this year, and I say this year, it's 2025 when I'm recording this, but I mean 2024. I did purchase the Book of Thoth by Aleister Crowley for this deck a few years ago and did dabble in it. But when I finally picked this deck up, I was pleasantly surprised. This is not a deck that I just pick up and like do a reading with, although I have done some multiple card readings with it. But this is one that I am just like slowly learning more about. I find that this deck is very blunt and clear, which I didn't anticipate from this deck. I didn't think I'd really like it much at all, to be honest, because the artwork is just, I mean, you look at all the other decks I've shown you, right? And then you look at this one and it's just, it's so different, so much more abstract. And it's all painted and I don't know. So I'm excited to continue learning with this deck, but this was a standout deck for me in 2024 because it was one that I had like started studying via the book before I got the deck, and then I finally did get the deck and I was like, interesting. So I am excited for when this one calls to me to dive into it a little more. But that is the Thoth deck by Aleister Crowley. Are we down to one deck? I think we are. Sorry, this is painted by Lady Frida Harris. It's not just by Crowley. And I'm going to get some side eyes for that. Last deck I want to mention is one that continues to be on my list every year, and one that I just am surprised by every year that it's still on the list, and that is the Supernatural Tarot. Now, normally I don't like tarot decks that are based on like a TV show, because I worry that it's going to be phoned in or not as deep, right? We see that with like the horror tarot, where like, yes, the artwork is great, but like the guidebook's not, you know what I mean? And this is kind of that same vibe. However, this deck is just, it loves to read. It loves to read for me. It loves to read for clients. It loves to read in programs. I should have mentioned this on my professional deck list, but I totally spaced it. And usually I don't like pip decks. But for some reason with this deck, it works, and I hardly ever get the pips. And I love this deck for its archetypes. I love that because you know the characters, or if you know the characters, you understand the rich amount of story that is connected to each character. And the person who chose to marry these characters with certain tarot cards really understood the meaning of the tarot. They did a fantastic job with it. And I just can't get enough of this like black, blue, red. Like, I love that most of the characters do look like the actors who played them. Like, this is Crowley, like pretty much off the screen, right? And here's Death in his like annoyed inconvenience face, you know, like it's so good. And like you have the ghost facers, and I don't know what it is about this deck. I don't know why it's so easy to read with. I don't know why I use it so much, even though it's like not like, if you were like best decks of all time, like based on artwork and the way that, you know, the thought behind them and the way they were put together and like XYZ, like you would think of something more like robust or less based in pop culture or the human psyche of just like people. But I think maybe that's why as well this deck works so well, is because this show is embedded in the culture and the psyche and the collective consciousness of a lot of people, especially a lot of us who are into, you know, spirituality and the supernatural. And to have this deck, to have the stories behind it, to have so much consciousness behind that, and to have it associated with something so mundane as watching a TV show, right? There's this interesting mixture. I love this Two of Cups card with Bobby and his friend there, whose name is escaping me at the moment. But there's something that makes it so versatile, because it is just day-to-day stuff mixed with the stories and the larger archetypes and the bigger characters and story arcs. It's a really, really great deck that I continue to use every year over and over again. And every time I go to pull it out for like a client reading or for myself, I'm like, really? That deck? My guys are like, yep, that deck. So this is the Supernatural Tarot. And I do love the cardstock and the way it shuffles. It's like, it's not glossy, but it's not matte. And it's like super like flimsy, but like it's not flimsy in the way that you feel like you're going to break it. Like it's still substantial, but it shuffles beautifully. I totally missed that bridge. So flexible, Betty. Anyway, that, my loves, completes my standout decks for 2024, my most used tarot decks in my personal practice. I did have this weird feeling before I like made this list of like there was a deck that was supposed to be on here that like I couldn't find. I don't know what deck it would be. I was looking at my shelves and I was like, what deck am I supposed to be talking about? Do you ever have that feeling like you think you have a deck and you don't know which one you're looking for, but like it doesn't seem to be there? I don't know. Anyway, I am going to go. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I'd love to hear about your own favorite decks of the year, standout decks of the year, most used, or whatever you'd like to share with me below. Check out the other videos I linked if you're interested in that. And if you want to book a tarot reading with me, you can do that down below too. I forgot to mention that in the professional tarot readings, but there you go. Video. Anyway, I'm going to go. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I'll see you again soon. Take care.